So hey guys, today we're back out here working on this 84 Porsche 944. So last time I was out here installing a new washer tank, so that's where we're going to pick up this time. You may remember that I was trying to find a good washer pump, but I gave up on all that and just ordered a new one, which I'm going to install. I've got the pump on now, and so that's just about going to do it for the engine bay. So what I'm going to do now is start working on the interior. You can see here that there is a lot to do here. I've got to replace this center console, get this carpet vacuumed and glued back into place. We're also going to be replacing the head unit and all the speakers. Then once all that's done, I've got the back to work on, and I've got to install a new headliner. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is try and get this console out here. You can see that this piece is missing entirely and it's broken off right there. There isn't a good way to replace this piece and get it back on there. You can see that I have the same issue on this side. So what I need to do is just put an entirely different console in here. I also have a dash cover that's going on here, and you can see that the A-pillar covers are cracked. So let me take you back here and show you what we got. See here, I've got the new dash cap, a new console. It is a bit faded. I wonder if I can clean it up and try and make it look a little bit better, but it is in much better condition than the one that's in the car. And then we have some covers here for the A-pillar that are in great shape. So as you can see, this console is starting to fade, and these brown consoles are rather hard to come by in good shape, so I'm going to have to make this work the best I can. Someone has repainted it sometime in the past, and you can see all that's flaking off now. So what I got to do is get all that old paint off there. Then to restore it, what I need to do is use some plastic paint that's going to bond to it, and it should look great. So here's the replacement console. I scrubbed it down and hit it with some plastic paint, and now it looks as good as new. So before I install the new console, one thing I needed to look at was why the slider for the heater control valve isn't working. And if I flip it over here, you can see that the cable is bent. So it looks like I'm going to have to replace that before going any further. So I've got the old cable out now. You can see just how damaged it is, and then I've got this one from a parts car that I'm going to be using. Alright, I've got the cable back in place now, and I should be able to install the console now. Unfortunately, I may need to remove the intake out here in order to get the other side put back in. So you can see the cable down in there, and I've got to connect it to that right there. So as I mentioned, I may have to pull the intake in order to get that done. Otherwise, I could end up bending this and then I'll have to replace it again. I have the intake pulled out of the way so I can get back there and put the cable on the heater control valve. So far, it's not going so well, but I should get it in here in just a moment. New cable is in and working properly now. So one last thing I need to do before this engine bay is perfect is clean all this up and replace the boot that goes over the relay and this plug here. In order to get it on, I have to depin this plug, and I've been using these tools here that I bought on Amazon, but they're very fragile, so I went ahead and bought this tool here, which has been working great. Once everything's depinned, you can just go ahead and pull it through. So in the last video I mentioned that the ignition switch was in pretty bad shape. Whenever I would stick the key in there, it would jam, and also the starter wasn't working properly. So while I was out, TJ went over to a parts car and pulled out another ignition and installed it, and as you can see here, the key works perfect now. Of course, that means that we're going to need to rekey the entire car to this key. So TJ's already got the trunk lock put in, and once we get these door handles off for paint, we'll be able to change those locks over as well. So we figured out why this seat wasn't mounted, and it looks like someone just ripped the seat up out of the floor. So the plan is to use this parts car and cut that piece out and weld it into the other car. Patrick's got the other part cut out and everything is lined up really nice. So now I can weld it in. Patrick has the replacement seat mounts welded in now, so I'm going to put the carpet back down. Patrick's finishing up the carpet now. As you can see, this console turned out really nice. Down here we have the head unit the owner sent to us, which is a Kenwood. And then we've got a set of Memphis speakers for the doors and for the rear. Alright, so the wiring TJ did looks pretty good. Everything is wired up properly. I'm not sure why they had a power wire running from the battery when everything that was in the car worked perfectly fine. So as you can see, we have a constant 12 volts right here at the plug without having to do anything. And so all we got to do now is start cleaning all this up. This wire here is for navigation, so we're not going to use it. This here is for the power antenna, and we will be using it once we get that in. This one here is for the illumination, which this radio doesn't have. So that pretty much wraps this whole thing up. We're just going to make it look good, and then we're done. So he's got the old speaker out now, and you can see that this wiring's a mess, so we're going to clean that up. And here's the new speaker, and you can also see that the pocket that the speaker sits in is missing, so we're going to replace that as well. So he pulled that factory speaker out and it wasn't even connected. He's got the rear speakers in now. Alright, we're just testing the radio and it's working perfectly. So unfortunately I'm not able to get a replacement set of brown panels for this car, so what I'm going to do is use these black panels here and try and modify them. I've got them stripped down right now and I'm going to try and turn these brown. Alright, so these panels are now brown and they look absolutely fantastic. I would never attempt this if I thought for a second that the panels would chip and you would see that black underneath, but I'll take you down here and show you an inconspicuous spot that I can take my fingernail and drag it along there, and since this is firmly bonded to it, it will never come off. All right, the headliner is out now. So here's what's left of the headliner, and this one just came in the mail. As you can see, it's black, so I'm going to be changing the color of it as well. Alright, so it's brown now, and while it is a little wadded up, I'm going to use a heat gun as we're installing it, and as we pull it tight, it should pull all those wrinkles out. So right here installing the headliner. I think any wrinkles left behind we can get out with the heat gun. Alright, we got the headliner in. We also got the sun visors and the A-pillar trim on. And as you can see, these are replacement pieces that have no cracks in them. TJ's shaping up the bodywork here. got the mirrors off, and now he's removing some of this trim around the windshield so that way we can paint the car. We've also got these door seals off since they were in pieces. So someone's got some RTV in there. We're going to be replacing that seal anyway, but it's going to be difficult to remove. So today I want to get this valance cleaned up and put back on. Before doing so, I'm going to scuff this area here and paint it red, so that way once the car is painted you won't see this blue here. So here's the replacement valance. You can see that I've already painted in behind the fog light, so everything will match once this is completely painted. And you can see the replacement fog lights here. I have the replacement valance on now, and you can really see that bend in it, but I'll take a heat gun to that later and that should come out. TJ's over here taping everything up, so that way we can prime this car and get it to paint. Alright, so at last we have the seat bolted in. Alright, so this car is slowly coming together. The other day, TJ pulled the hood liner off, and so we're going to get a new one installed. And once that's done, we just got to finish up the interior here, and this thing will be ready to go to paint. So we're trying to figure out what's going on with the sunroof. It keeps blowing fuses, so what I'm going to do is go up to the fuse here and use the multimeter and see if we're grounding out when I press on the switch. Alright, so I pulled the main switch in the console, and I found that with the key in, I'm not getting 12 volts on number 2, but I am getting 12 volts on 1 when I turn the ignition on. And in the rear here, you can see that all these wires are correct except this red and black here is swapped with the black one. So that could be why our fuse is blowing right there. Someone has swapped these around. So since correcting the wiring on this micro switch back here, the fuse hasn't blown, and I went ahead and verified that we had 12 volts at 87 here and 87 on this relay as well. And then we verified that we had grounds on 86 here, and then 87A here and here. And if you flip them over, you can also see how it's supposed to be wired. Ground on 86, then also ground on 87A, and we have 12 volts on 87. So far everything is looking pretty good here. I'm up here looking at the switch now, and with the key inserted, I'm supposed to have 12 volts on number 2, which I do not have, but I do have 12 volts on number 1 with the key in the on position. So I'm gonna have to trace this back and see what's going wrong there. We're trying to get the sunroof working and the other red 944, and we can't find a diagram for the wiring to this switch or the sunroof in the rear. I can find the micro switch wiring, but that's about it. So I decided to come over here to my 84944 and look at the wiring. So I tried looking online for a wiring diagram to this switch, and I didn't have any luck. Fortunately, I have an 84944 with a working sunroof, so I just went over there and was able to look at the wiring on it, and these wires were all scrambled around and not in the correct spot, and we have that fixed now. So we got all the wiring sorted out with the sunroof, and while we could raise and lower it manually, it wouldn't work with the motor. So we ended up getting an entirely different motor assembly, and then it locked up on us. So right now we've got everything apart, so that way we can re-grease it, and hopefully once we get everything back together, it'll work properly. So we got everything back together now, and the roof works as it should. So as you can see, the sunroof is working perfectly now. So next I'm going to go ahead and install the headliner and get these trim panels put back in. Last night we got the car put back down on the ground. I also got the fuse box back in after we had to trace the wires back going to the sunroof switch. But now that all that's fixed, I'm going to try and get the center console in today and TJ's going to work on rebuilding the rear brakes. TJ's got everything apart now, and he just installed a new rear rubber brake line, and now he's getting ready to put the caliper back on. TJ's finishing up this brake caliper now. TJ's got one side rebuilt and he's working on the other now. TJ's over here filling up the brake fluid reservoir. We're getting ready to bleed the brakes, and then we'll bleed the clutch, and maybe we can drive this car. Since there's no fluid in the lines, we're going to start with this right rear caliper, since it is the furthest one from the master cylinder. So the brakes are now bled, and this will mark the first time that this car has had brakes since it's been here. Alright guys, I'm working on that center console right now. As you can see, I've got the engine up to temp, and I'm just checking that the fans work, and they are. Take you around out here, let you hear them run. Alright, I've got the gauges back in now, and as you can see, most of these bulbs up here are blown, so it's going to be a lot of fun going in and replacing all these. Alright, so I've got the console installed now, and we can drive the car. So the one last thing I need to do before this car goes to paint is replace the chip guard that goes along the bottom here. I have this side masked off now, and I'm going to be using some SEM heavy texture chip guard. I have one side done now. I have this other side masked off now, so I'll go ahead and spray it, and we'll just about be done with this car. Alright guys, the rollback's here this morning, and we're going to load her up and take her to paint. Alright, good? Alright guys, this car is heading to paint, and so that's where we'll pick up next time. If you'd like to stay up to date with some of the projects we're working on around the shop, be sure to join us on Facebook. I'll leave a link in the description below. I also want to thank everyone who supports this channel on Patreon, since these videos would not be possible without you. But anyway guys, that's going to do it. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.